Everyone knows T-Rex was the apex predator, the king, the undisputed heavyweight champion of the Mesozoic. It's literally in the name Tyrannosaurus Rex. Rex, as in king. That's not a nickname somebody gave it at a fossil dig. That's the official scientific designation, signed off by actual paleontologists who looked at that animal and said, yeah, that checks out. That thing is royalty. And for most of your life, that framing has gone completely unchallenged. T-Rex on every lunchbox, every movie poster, every natural history museum centerpiece. The 12-meter, 39-foot-long, 8-ton killing machine standing front and center like it owns the place. Because it did. Right? Well, here's the thing. New fossil evidence, biomechanical modeling, and a growing body of comparative predator research are collectively suggesting something that would absolutely ruin T-Rex's reputation if dinosaurs had the internet. There were animals, real flesh and blood predators, that T-Rex would have actively avoided. Not because T-Rex was weak, but because some things that walked this earth were so catastrophically over-engineered for violence that even an 8-ton theropod with a bite force stronger than any land animal in history had to do the prehistoric equivalent of crossing to the other side of the street. We're not talking about monsters from science fiction. We're talking about animals with verified fossil records, measured and studied and argued over by paleontologists for decades. Animals that, compared to T-Rex, were bigger, more aggressive, more heavily armed, or hunting in ways that made solo apex predation look almost quaint. So today? No, we're not doing today. Let's just say, what you're about to hear is the part of the Mesozoic story that somehow never made it onto the lunchbox. The world before the king. To understand why T-Rex had anything to worry about, you first need to understand the world it inherited and the worlds that came before it. T-Rex didn't emerge into a vacuum. It evolved in the late Cretaceous, specifically the Maastrichtian stage, somewhere around 68 to 66 million years ago. That's the very tail end of the Mesozoic era, the last chapter, practically the final paragraph before the asteroid hit, and the whole story got violently edited. By this point, the supercontinent of Pangaea was ancient history. The continents were drifting into something that would eventually become recognizable, but the map still looked deeply wrong. North America was split down the middle by a shallow inland sea called the Western Interior Seaway. Picture a warm, relatively calm body of water running from what is now the Gulf of Mexico all the way up to the Arctic Ocean, basically cutting the continent in half. On the western side of that seaway sat Laramidia, a long landmass stretching roughly from modern-day Alaska down to Mexico. That's where T-Rex lived. That's where this entire story mostly takes place. The climate was warmer than today, no polar ice caps, sea levels significantly higher, and average global temperatures running roughly 4 to 10 degrees Celsius or 7 to 18 degrees Fahrenheit above what we'd consider normal now. Laramidia was lush, humid. Floodplains, river deltas, dense subtropical forests. Think less Jurassic Park open savanna and more Louisiana bayou, but scaled up to a geological absurdity. And the ecosystems of Laramidia were, to put it scientifically, stacked. This wasn't some sparse, post-extinction scrubland with a few big animals bumbling around. This was one of the most ecologically dense environments in vertebrate history. Every niche was filled, every size class had something terrifying in it. The herbivores alone, your Triceratops, your Edmontosaurus, your Ankylosaurus, were running around at sizes and defensive configurations that would make a modern lion deeply reconsider its career choices. Now, here's the fun part. T-Rex, for all its glory, was a Maastrichtian animal, a late arrival. The entire Mesozoic era spanned roughly 186 million years, and T-Rex occupied approximately the final 2 million of those. 2 million years sounds like a lot until you realize that's about 1% of the total runtime. T-Rex showed up at the very end of a very long and very violent film. And before it arrived, during the earlier Cretaceous, during the Jurassic, during periods stretching back through the Triassic, there were other things. Things that were doing the apex predator job before T-Rex even existed. Things that were, in some measurable ways, doing it better. Introducing the heavyweights. Let's talk about Spinosaurus first, because Spinosaurus is the one that started the argument. For most of the 20th century, Spinosaurus aegyptiacus was kind of a footnote. It was known from fragmentary fossils discovered in Egypt in 1912, and most of those original specimens were destroyed during World War II in a 1944 bombing raid, which is genuinely one of the more tragic losses in the history of paleontology. For decades, estimates were rough and reconstructions were all over the place. Then, between 2014 and 2020, everything changed. New fossils from Morocco's Kem Formation started filling in the gaps, and what emerged was an animal so anatomically bizarre that paleontologists genuinely spent years arguing about whether the reconstruction made sense. Current best estimates put Spinosaurus at somewhere between 14 and 15 meters long. That's 46 to 49 feet, making it the longest known carnivorous dinosaur ever discovered. For scale, a standard school bus is about 11 meters or 35 feet. Spinosaurus was longer than a school bus and a half, end to end. In terms of length, it beats T-Rex by roughly 2 to 3 meters or 6 to 10 feet. Now, and this is where it gets interesting, Spinosaurus probably didn't outweigh T-Rex. The body plan was different. Spinosaurus had a long, low skull, almost crocodilian in shape, dense with conical teeth designed for gripping slippery prey rather than crushing bone. It had unusually short hind limbs for a theropod, dense bones suggesting it spent significant time in water, and that iconic sail or hump structure on its back, supported by neural spines up to 1.65 meters or 5.4 feet tall, whose actual function is still debated. Thermoregulation, display, fat storage, some combination. Nobody fully agrees yet. What we do know is that Spinosaurus was primarily a piscivore, a fish eater. And before you say, oh, so it just ate fish tea, Rex wins. The fish it was eating were the size of cars. The Kem Formation also contains remains of Onchopristis, a sawfish with a rostrum lined with barbed teeth that reached lengths of around 8 meters or 26 feet. Spinosaurus was hunting things that would terrify a modern great white shark. That's not a soft diet, that's just a different kind of violence. But Spinosaurus lived in North Africa during the Cenomanian stage of the Cretaceous, roughly 95 to 100 million years ago. It and T-Rex were separated by about 30 million years and an ocean. They never met. So why does it matter? Because Spinosaurus represents a category, a proof of concept. The concept being theropod dinosaurs could get bigger than T. Rex could occupy apex predator niches and could do it in ecological settings T. Rex never encountered. The world had room for things larger than the so-called king, and it used that room. Now let's talk about Carcharodontosaurus. Carcharodontosaurus saharicus. The name literally means shark-toothed lizard from the Sahara, and the naming committee really earned their salary on that one, because it is exactly what it sounds like. Estimated at 12 to 13 meters long, 39 to 43 feet, with a skull nearly 1.6 meters or over 5 feet in length, Carcharodontosaurus had laterally compressed, serrated teeth that functioned like steak knives rather than the thick, railroad spike teeth of T. Rex. Different strategy, not crushing and pulverizing bone, but slicing through flesh and causing massive hemorrhagic wounds. Think less sledgehammer, more set of extremely large and enthusiastic scissors. Also from North Africa, also roughly 95 to 100 million years ago, possibly sharing territory with Spinosaurus in what would have been one of the most aggressively overpopulated predator communities in the fossil record. Multiple giant theropods in the same ecosystem. Paleontologists call this the River of Giants scenario, and it remains one of the most debated ecological puzzles in Mesozoic research. And then there's Giganotosaurus carolini from late Cretaceous Argentina, around 98 to 97 million years ago. Estimated length of 12 to 13 meters, or 39 to 43 feet, with some fragmentary specimens suggesting individuals possibly reaching 13.2 meters, or 43.3 feet. Giganotosaurus was the apex predator of Gondwana, the southern supercontinent, at a time when South America was still an island continent, isolated from North America, evolving its own suite of enormous and deeply strange animals entirely independently. And the prey items Giganotosaurus was hunting? Titanosaur sauropods. We're talking about animals like Argentinosaurus, which current estimates put it somewhere between 70 and 80 tonnes and up to 30 to 35 meters, or 98 to 115 feet long. Argentinosaurus may be the largest animal ever to walk on land, depending on which estimates you're using and how much coffee the paleontologist had that morning. Giganotosaurus was hunting that, possibly in coordinated groups, based on the bone bed evidence at certain South American sites, though pack hunting for large theropods is still a contested hypothesis, and I'll acknowledge that debate rather than just running with the exciting version. But the point is, Giganotosaurus was built for a predatory context that T-Rex never faced. T-Rex's largest prey, your Triceratops, your Edmontosaurus, were massive by any reasonable standard, but they weren't Argentinosaurus. Giganotosaurus was playing a different, arguably harder ecological game. Fill out the rest of the late Cretaceous Laramidian ecosystem around T. Rex, and you get a picture that further complicates the undisputed king narrative. Daspletosaurus, an earlier tyrannosaur, occupied the same general region millions of years before T-Rex, and was itself a formidable predator, roughly 8 to 9 meters or 26 to 30 feet long, closely related, possibly a direct ancestor. The tyrannosaur lineage was already dominant before T-Rex showed up and refined it to an extreme. Albertosaurus and Gorgosaurus, both tyrannosaurids, both contemporaries of the slightly earlier Cretaceous, were smaller, faster, possibly more agile versions of the same basic body plan. Bone beds in Alberta suggest Albertosaurus may have hunted in groups. Again, contested, but the bone bed evidence is real. The hadrosaurs, duck-billed dinosaurs like Edmontosaurus and Parasaurolophus, formed enormous herding populations and represented the primary prey base for large theropods in Laramidia. Some Edmontosaurus specimens show healed bite wounds from tyrannosaurs on their tail vertebrae, suggesting the prey sometimes got away. Life was not a guaranteed meal, even for an apex predator. Ankylosaurus magniventris rounded out the defensive megafauna, roughly 6 to 8 meters or 20 to 26 feet long, covered in osteoderms, armored skin plates, and swinging a tail club made of fused bone that biomechanical studies suggest could strike with enough force to shatter the lower leg bones of a large theropod. T. Rex encountering a healthy adult Ankylosaurus wasn't hunting. It was negotiating. Here's the thing about apex predators that doesn't get discussed enough in the lunchbox and movie poster version of dinosaur history. They don't evolve in isolation, they evolve in response to something. B. Rex's entire body plan, the massive skull, the bone-crushing bite, the binocular vision, the tiny arms that are actually not useless and stop laughing, is the product of an evolutionary arms race that played out over tens of millions of years across the entire Cretaceous period. Every feature of T. Rex is an answer to a question that the ecosystem kept asking. The bone-crushing bite, estimated at somewhere between 35,000 and 57,000 newtons of force, which is roughly 3.5 to 5.7 times the bite force of a saltwater crocodile, the current land and water record holder, evolved because the prey animals of Laramidia were enormous and heavily built and nutritionally inaccessible unless you could get through their bones to the marrow. T-Rex wasn't just killing things, it was processing carcasses in a way that other predators couldn't, accessing caloric resources that were locked away inside bone. The binocular vision, T-Rex had a field of binocular overlap estimated at around 55 degrees, comparable to a modern hawk, evolved for precise depth perception at close range. Useful for targeting specific anatomical weak points on very large, very dangerous prey. The so-called tiny arms, which were actually around 1 meter or 3 feet long, heavily muscled, and capable of lifting around 200 kilograms or 440 pounds each, are now theorized by some researchers, including a 2022 paper by Kevin Padian, to have been shortened specifically to prevent injury during feeding frenzies when multiple T-Rex individuals were crowding a carcass. Short arms don't get bitten off by your relatives. Natural selection, everybody. But now run the same analysis on Carcharodontosaurus or Giganotosaurus, and you get a completely different set of answers to completely different ecological questions. The blade-like teeth of Carcharodontosaurids weren't built for bone crushing, they were built for soft tissue damage on animals so large that a single killing bite wasn't realistic. The strategy appears to have been wound and pursue, inflict catastrophic hemorrhaging cuts, track the prey as it weakens, feed opportunistically. Like a shark, hence the name. Spinosaurus's entire body plan is an answer to the question, what if there were fish too big for anything else to hunt? Dense bones for buoyancy control. A pressure-sensitive snout that may have detected prey movement in murky water, similar to modern gharials and crocodilians. Short back legs that repositioned the center of gravity for aquatic stability at the cost of terrestrial speed. Spinosaurus on land was probably awkward. Spinosaurus in the water was something else entirely. These weren't failed experiments or runners-up. They were highly optimized answers to specific ecological problems. And the problems they were solving were, in several cases, bigger problems than T-Rex ever faced. The evolutionary pressure that produced these animals was relentless, continent-spanning and operating across timescales that are genuinely difficult to hold in your head. From the first true theropods in the late Triassic, roughly 230 million years ago, to T. Rex at 66 million years ago, that's 164 million years of escalating predator-prey arms races, continental drift reshuffling the ecological deck, mass extinctions wiping out entire faunas and forcing rapid evolutionary rebounds, and climate shifts that repeatedly rewrote the rules of who could survive where. T-Rex was the final draft. The others were earlier drafts that weren't wrong, they were just answering different prompts. Now, here's where the nuance lives. And I want to be careful here because this is where a lot of popular media gets it wrong in ways that frustrate paleontologists. The majority of these animals, Spinosaurus, Carcharodontosaurus, Giganotosaurus, did not coexist with T-Rex. They were separated by geography, by tens of millions of years, or both. Any comparison between them and T-Rex is explicitly hypothetical in terms of direct interaction. What we can do is compare them on measurable metrics, body size, estimated bite force, locomotion, sensory capability, and ecological role. And when you do that comparison rigorously, the picture that emerges is not T. Rex dominates everything. The picture is T. Rex was the best adapted large theropod predator for its specific time, place, and prey base, and several other large theropods were comparably or differently optimized for their own contexts. That's less catchy than T. Rex wins, but it's what the evidence actually supports. However, there are animals that did coexist with T-Rex in Laramidia during the Maastrichtian, and for which we have fossil evidence of actual ecological interaction. And some of those interactions were not straightforwardly in T-Rex's favor. Triceratops horridus, up to 9 meters, or 29.5 feet long, potentially 12 tons, 3 forward-facing horns, the 2 brow horns reaching up to 1 meter or 3 feet in length, and a neck frill reinforced with bone. We have T-Rex bite marks on Triceratops bones. We also have Triceratops horn marks on T-Rex bones. Both animals were wounding each other in documented, fossil-preserved interactions. A defensive adult Triceratops was not prey, it was a problem. Ankylosaurus, as mentioned, that tail club. Biomechanical modelling published in 2009 and refined in subsequent studies suggests the club could swing with enough velocity to fracture the metatarsals, the foot bones of a large theropod. T-Rex with a broken foot is T-Rex that starves. There's an argument that healthy adult Ankylosaurus individuals were effectively off the menu, and that T. Rex preferentially targeted juveniles, the elderly, or the already injured, which honestly is how most large predators actually operate. Lions don't fight healthy Cape buffalo for fun. And then there's the intraspecific competition question, T-Rex versus other T-Rex individuals. We have fossil evidence of T-Rex bite marks on other T-Rex bones, including what appear to be face-biting interactions that may reflect territorial disputes or competition over carcasses. T-Rex was not operating in a world where it was the only dangerous animal. It was operating in a world where the second most dangerous animal was often another T-Rex. So who wins? I mean, that depends entirely on what you think winning means in an evolutionary context, and I'm going to give you the unsatisfying but accurate answer: it's the wrong question. Spinosaurus won its ecosystem for millions of years. Carcharodontosaurus dominated North Africa for the better part of 10 million years. Giganotosaurus ruled South America during a period when South America was home to the largest animals ever to walk on land. These weren't losers, they were champions of their own specific contexts, and then they stopped existing for reasons that had nothing to do with some hypothetical encounter with T-Rex. The Carcharodontosaurids went into decline during the late Cretaceous, replaced in their apex predator roles by Abelisaurids in the southern continents and by the expanding Tyrannosaur lineage in the north. The exact causes are debated, but likely involve the same combination of factors that reshaped every Cretaceous ecosystem repeatedly: sea level changes altering available habitat, climate fluctuations, the constantly shifting biogeographic puzzle of the continents, and the relentless background hum of competitive exclusion. Spinosaurus's fate is interesting. The Kem-Kem Formation, which preserves the Cenomanian environment where Spinosaurus lived, transitions into increasingly arid conditions in the upper layers. The fish-rich river systems that Spinosaurus depended on appear to have contracted. Whether Spinosaurus populations dwindled due to habitat loss, or whether their disappearance from the fossil record reflects preservation bias or geographic range shift, this is still being worked out. The Spinosaurus story is genuinely unfinished. T-Rex, for its part, won the Maastrichtian of Laramidia. It was the dominant large theropod of its time and place, highly successful, ecologically flexible enough to fill a scavenging role when active hunting wasn't necessary. A behavioral flexibility that multiple studies on T-Rex olfactory capability and vision support. The massive olfactory bulbs in T-Rex endocosts suggest a sense of smell that rivals or exceeds modern turkey vultures. T-Rex could smell a carcass from kilometers away. It was not too proud to eat something that died without its help. And then 66 million years ago, an asteroid approximately 10 to 15 kilometers or 6 to 9 miles in diameter hit the Yucatan Peninsula at roughly 20 kilometers per second, released energy equivalent to somewhere around 1 billion Hiroshima bombs, triggered global wildfires, launched debris into the upper atmosphere that blocked photosynthesis globally for months to years, and ended the Cretaceous period with a violence that made every predator-prey interaction we've been discussing look like a minor disagreement. T-Rex went extinct, every non-avian dinosaur went extinct, all of the apex predators, all of the giant prey animals, all of the ecological complexity that had been building for 165 million years, gone, in geological terms. Essentially instantaneously. The winners were small, furry, good at hiding, operating on metabolisms that could survive on very little when the food chain collapsed. Mammals, which had been scurrying around in the shadows of dinosaurs for the entire Mesozoic, keeping a very low profile, not drawing any attention, suddenly inherited a world with no large competitors and no large predators, and proceeded to diversify into every ecological niche that the non-avian dinosaurs left empty. That radiation produced over the following 66 million years elephants, whales, horses, bats, and eventually primates who developed the ability to dig up dinosaur bones and argue on the internet about which one was the biggest. The birds survived too, of course, because birds are dinosaurs, specifically avian theropods, nested within the same evolutionary lineage as T, Rex and Spinosaurus and every other theropod we've discussed. When you watch a crow solve a puzzle or a hawk stoop at 150 kilometers per hour on a pigeon, you are watching the direct descendants of the lineage that included T-Rex. The theropods didn't go extinct. They just got smaller, gained feathers, and figured out flight, which honestly is a more impressive long-term survival strategy than being 12 meters long and biting things really hard. So what does this all mean for T-Rex's reputation? Here's where I land on it. T-Rex deserves every lunchbox. It was extraordinary, genuinely one of the most highly optimized predators in the history of vertebrate life, precisely calibrated for its ecosystem in ways we're still fully unpacking. The recent discoveries around its sensory capabilities, its social behavior, its potential feathering, its ontogenetic growth rates, T-Rex gets more impressive, not less, the more rigorously it's studied. But the undisputed king framing has always been a marketing choice more than a scientific one. The Mesozoic was 186 million years of non-stop biological innovation, and it produced dozens of apex predator lineages across every continent, every period, every ecological context. Some of them were bigger. Some of them were differently lethal. Some of them were hunting prey that T-Rex could never have managed. The correct framing isn't T, Rex versus the others. The correct framing is that the Mesozoic was a 186 million year tournament run on multiple continents simultaneously with different brackets and different rules and T. Rex won the final round of one bracket at the very end of the game, right before the whole stadium got hit by an asteroid. That's not a diminishment. That's actually a more interesting story, and it's a lot more interesting than anything you'll find on a lunchbox. Thanks for watching, and until next time on Prehistoric Explained.